Okay, so how do we write functions, equations for to represent these sinusoidal graphs? So let's look at number 5 here. I'll save the evens for you folks to do. But let's see here. Let me get a mouse here. I mean a board going here, and let me change my ink to black. Here we go. So I'm seeing this function here. I see a midline of -4. Above and below that line, the graph goes above it and below it 3 spaces. So that's the amplitude. Now, because this graph starts on the midline, I'm going to use sine. I could use cosine, but I don't know what point that is. I don't know what x is. It's probably 0.5, but I don't know that for sure. I certainly know that this is 0. So I would write, and the period, I guess we can figure out. So it takes 2 units to repeat. So the b number is 2 pi divided by the period, so that's pi. So for this graph, I would write y equals 3, because that's the amplitude of sine of pi t or pi x minus the midline. Okay, so that would make it with a positive. Well, the amplitude's always positive. It's just whether it's reflected around the x-axis or not. Suppose I wanted to start this graph. I mean, I don't know why I would want to do that, but I could. Suppose I wanted to start this graph here or back here, because this is what somebody asked about. How do I know whether A is negative or not? Well, in that case, normally sine graphs start on their midline and increase. But now this graph, if I start right there, is starting on the midline and decreasing. So what's going to be different about this function is I have to have it reflected around the horizontal axis, and it's a sine. And then of course this is shifted. This is shifted to right 1. So x minus 1 minus 4. Notice the way I put the pi outside of another set of parentheses. Okay, you want to do that. Okay, so same deal here. Right now, here's a cosine graph. I know it's a cosine because it's got a nice lattice point at the peaks and the valleys, right? I'm seeing a midline. Let's see. I think the midline is 1. Y equals 1 because it's going down 2 and up 2 from there. If I start with that point, it's not shifted left or right at all. So y equals, if the amplitude is 2, cosine, let's see, what's the period? The period is 4 pi. It takes 4 pi to repeat. So 2 pi divided by 4 pi is 1/2. So 1/2 x. And it's not shifted left or right, but it is shifted up 1, so plus 1. So that started there. Now, what if I had wanted to start it here instead? Well, it's shifted right pi over 2. So I know it's going to be 1/2 x minus pi over 2. And I know that midline's still the same. And what's different is that it'll be a -2 cosine, because we've got to show how it's reflected around the midline, around the horizontal axis. Okay, so that's how you can tell whether the amplitude is positive or negative or not. Well, the amplitude is always positive. How you can tell if the A number is positive or negative or not.